Hi, I'm Terry Cook. You're watching Hamilton's Vital Signs. Great to be back with you. I have a special guest this week. We're talking about our healthy future in Hamilton, and a friend of longstanding, Rob MacIsaac, is with us. Rob, you're the president and CEO of Hamilton Health Sciences, but of course we met many, many moons ago when you were a young councillor in Aldershot prior to becoming the mayor of Burlington.
For sure.
You've had a bit of a circuitous career. You became first of all, while you were the mayor, you led a provincial task force that led to the creation of the Greenbelt in Ontario, which has left a lasting imprint in terms of smart growth in this province. You were then the first chair of the Metrolinx board, establishing our interregional transit system that will ultimately build upon this community and communities across the GTA. Then spent 5 great years at Mohawk College in Hamilton, building that great institution. And lo and behold, you're now leading the largest healthcare institution in Hamilton. And suffice it to say, this is a little bit different than being a mayor?
It is and it isn't. For sure, all of those jobs, I think, you start to acquire a bit of a skill set as you do each one of those jobs. And for sure, as long as I'm in the public sector, I think those skill sets will prove to be useful for me. But there's no doubt healthcare is a beast unique unto itself. And so just finished my second anniversary at Hamilton Health Sciences. Thanks. It was a big learning curve for me, for sure. I think I'm starting to better understand the language. Every sector that you go into, they have their own language, and it's kind of it's a way to be to speak in shorthand, so that you don't have to go through big lengthy descriptions and acronyms and so on. But so that's always one of the challenges entering into a new sector, and healthcare probably has it's sort of like learning Mandarin. It's the most involved of the languages that I've had to learn. But yeah, after 2 years, feeling a lot more comfortable in my own skin in the job, and starting to appreciate what an amazing institution that Hamilton Health Sciences is, and how I think for most of us living in this region, living in this city, people don't appreciate what a world-class institution they have here in Hamilton. And it's easy to take it for granted, but you shouldn't. There are a lot of people who have to travel amazing distances across the province to come here for the services that
we take for granted. Is in our backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're a lawyer by training. Lots of depth of leadership in governance and in municipal stuff. Talk to me a little bit about the transition of roles and some of the experiences that you've had that have prepared you for this specific role at a particularly challenging time in the history of healthcare in Ontario.
Yeah, I think so. When I think back on my time as mayor, what most people don't appreciate about being a head of council, you would know this, is
it's a great gig, first of all.
Yeah, it's a fabulous job. I love the job. But there are very few formal levers of power that you have as a head of council. I'm not saying there are none, but by and large, it's a leadership gig where you need to lead through the power of your communication, through your ability to inspire people, to get people to see, a vision that they find compelling. It's a lot about your ability just to relate to people, and so that's an important skill that has served me well, not just as a mayor, but for sure at Metrolinx, at Mohawk College, and now in healthcare. Maybe even more so in healthcare, because when you think about how the kind of governance that's in place in a healthcare institution, there is a huge group of constituents, namely the doctors, who they aren't my employees, right, and they don't have to do what I tell them to do. And so, and at the same time, they're absolutely critical to the success of the institution. So that skill, which I'm trying very hard to work, will be an important one for healthcare moving forward. For me to be able to articulate a vision that a broad group of stakeholders over whom I have no formal levers of power to buy into.
So tell me about your immersion in the sector? Because I tease you about you're not a doc, you don't have a background in healthcare other than some governance roles. How did you go about trying to understand the complexities of the technical elements of the job and the different constituencies that you were going to have to wrestle with?
Yeah, I do recall on first taking the job that you were advising people to go to St. Joe's for the first...
That's stuck in your memory, I see. Probably good advice for the first little while, but you've overcome that, obviously.
Yeah, I tried to approach this in the way that I've approached other jobs, and for sure I think when you're entering into a new sector, no matter what it is, but most particularly in healthcare, as a newcomer, like, you need to enter with a degree of humility. Mm-hmm. You can't come in sort of making out like you're going to fix everything that's wrong, and on and on. So I think you need to be a good listener, and take some time to learn. I've been doing a few things about, just to try to get myself out onto the floor on a regular basis so that I can observe what people are doing, learn people's jobs throughout the organization. And there's no substitute for actually going to the coalface, mm-hmm. And watching people as they do their jobs and saying to them, what's driving you crazy today? And what are the things about this place that you would fix if you were in the role? And so, for me and for my team moving forward, that attitude of humility, of maybe changing the culture of healthcare to recognize that, going forward, I think value in healthcare is really going to be created at the front line. And so we have to be really good about listening to what our nurses and our doctors are telling us. For sure, we have to set big goals, big ambitious goals for the organization, and make sure that that's well understood throughout all of the ranks. But at the same time, within those parameters, within the those big broad goals that you're setting for the institution, in terms of how you're going to get there, a lot of it's about listening to people at the front line.
And what's the state of play on the front line right now? How stressed is the system? How are people feeling in that dichotomy between hope and despair? Obviously, there are significant fiscal challenges, and there's also a demographic wave that is putting, I think, unprecedented pressure on the folks who are trying to deliver your essential services.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So we're going into I'm going to say our fourth or fifth year of no funding increases from the province. So, the province has made some very deliberate decisions about how they wanted to shape healthcare, and, they don't see hospitals as playing nearly the role in the future that they played in the past. And so there's been a very deliberate effort on behalf of the province to redirect resources away from hospitals and into other kinds of health initiatives. So for us in the hospitals, at the same time that that's happening, as you suggested, we're seeing this demographic wave mm-hmm. Coming towards us, and it's at our front door, and it really relates to the fact that there is a very clear correlation between age and hospital use. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that just because you're old you're going to use the hospital a lot, but there's no doubt, on average, as people get older, they tend to use hospital services more, and we've got the number of people turning 65 is growing every day. So that we're seeing this kind of perfect storm between funding restrictions and demand for services rising. And it does place a big strain on our workers. And so, I think the message I've been giving to our workers is, look, that's not going to change. We are going to have a hard row to hoe for a long time. And so we need to be smarter about how we do our work and find new solutions. But there's no doubt, the nurses, the porters, everybody across the whole institution they're doing yeoman's service, and they get tired. There's no doubt. But on the other hand, I am amazed almost on a daily basis at the great work that they're doing, and the number of people that they help, and the compassion that they do it with.
I have to tell you, our family interaction with the healthcare system is framed by two experiences in the last 12 or 13 years. One was having 3 kids born in a local hospital at St. Joe's, obviously the wonderful, unbelievable sense of importance and great service. And the other one was having my grandfather pass away at one of your hospitals at 101 this year. And we were struck both by the level of demand on your frontline staff, but also the way in which they persevered and provided great quality of care, which obviously at those two great junctures in life is all that you can ask, is that there will be caring, compassionate caregivers that will make those events what they should be, which are wonderful celebrations at either end of the spectrum. So I have to say, we were moved and impressed in both cases, notwithstanding the clear stresses that are evident.
Yeah, it's nice to hear you say that, and I get to hear lots of great stories, positive stories. I mean, obviously, I'd like to hear as many as there are out there, and I think there's lots more than I ever get to hear. It's interesting that you say that about your grandfather. I would hope that 5 years from, if your grandfather died, even 5 years from now or 10 years from now, maybe he wouldn't have had to die in a hospital. Maybe he could have died somewhere else. Because we're not set up. Nobody lives their life hoping to die in a hospital.
And I think all things considered, that's why the pivot that you're in the midst of trying to make is so important to our future. And so let's talk about our healthy future, because your institution is engaged in perhaps the largest process of community engagement and visioning about where this system and your institutions need to be 10, 15, 20 years out. And I want to start by just having you talk to me about the deliberateness with which you're undertaking that challenge to community to think about both the stresses and the possibilities.
Yeah, so I'm going to say a year and a half ago, we at the management group at Hamilton Health Sciences really began to understand the need to figure out a process that would start us down a road for fundamental transformation in the healthcare system. And it was because of those factors that I was talking to you about before. That we knew that there wasn't going to be a sudden, a giant big pot of money that was going to become available to us. We knew that demands on our services, if we don't do anything, is going to continue to rise. But there are other things that are impacting on healthcare. Technology is such a big driver of cost for us. At the field of information analytics opens up all these interesting new possibilities for us. So. We wanted to engage in a process that would start to in a really thoughtful way, transform healthcare, and we wanted to start that kick that process off by talking to the community, because, at the end of the day, that's why we're here. We're here to serve the community, and so we didn't want this to be just another process where the hospital, the big house up on the hill, is starting to pass down edicts about the way things were going to be. So we went out into the community, held a series of not exactly town halls, but kind of open meetings where we were asking people questions about what is it that you value most about healthcare, and what would your ambitions be for our healthcare system if it could be everything you wanted it to be. And it's been a very fruitful process for us. I think, after we got out of the first round of consultation, where we talked to well over 1,000 people, asking them those open-ended questions, people started to say, well, we want to have a great experience when we come into hospital. We want our family to be involved in the process. We want to feel like there's somebody there who will advocate for us when we are in hospital, that we've got a champion at all times. We want the system to be easy to navigate, so it should be, we don't want to have to guess what's coming next, or where do we get in, or how do we get out. And I think most profoundly, the final point, and to some extent all those things flow from this, is people said, treat us with dignity when we're in the hospital. We want to feel like we're somebody, and like you care about what it is that we have to say. And I think all those things really go to a change in expectation about the relationship between patients and hospital, or patients and doctors. People don't want to be in a situation where they're simply being told what to do by their doctor. People, they kind of want to have a partnership where they say, well, let's talk about what are the options, and how might my path unfold, and how do I want to sculpt that. So the one surprising thing I'll say about the whole process, it was kind of surprising to me. People didn't talk that much about quality, and I don't think it's that they don't care about quality, the quality of the care they're receiving. I think people simply see that as table stakes, right. That when they show up, they're going to get the best quality of care possible. And I guess it feels surprising from the inside, because I know how hard we have to work to provide quality care on a daily basis. It is almost all-consuming. And yet, when we went out to talk to the public, that wasn't top of mind for them. It was more about how do you make me feel when I'm there?
Perfect note to go to a break. I'm with Rob MacIsaac, the President and CEO of Hamilton Health Sciences. We're talking about our healthy future. You're watching Hamilton's Vital Signs. I'm Terry Cook. We'll be right back.
Hey, Mom, is it okay if Sarah comes over for dinner tonight?
Yeah, as long as it's okay with her mom.
Can she?
Yeah, of course.
Yes!
At Ronald McDonald House, we give families a home away from home, close to their sick children.
Online shopping. Soon it will be the way many of us shop for just about everything. And that's where we come in. Canada Post delivers more parcels to Canadians than anyone else. Canada Post, delivering the online world.
And we're back. I'm Terry Cook. You're watching Hamilton's Vital Signs, and I'm here with Rob MacIsaac, the President and CEO of Hamilton Health Sciences, and I might say an old political crony of mine. Good to have you with us.
Great to be here.
We're talking about the engagement, Our Healthy Future, that your institution is involved with, really an unprecedented visioning exercise about where we're going. Let me start with a bit of a hardball, which is inevitably the public faced with large-scale engagements and visioning exercise may have a knee-jerk reaction that really this is a pretense to cut costs and diminish services. And how do you get over that inevitable public skepticism to get to a point where we're having hard and genuine conversation about some of the choices that are in front of us?
Well, the extraordinary thing I think about healthcare is the huge relationship between quality and cost. And it's kind of an inverse relationship, which might be kind of counterintuitive for some people, but the fact of the matter is there is so much money spent in healthcare that's not aimed at producing great quality outcomes for people. We talked about your grandfather passing away in a hospital. It's an interesting example of the very phenomenon that I'm talking about. There's probably nowhere more expensive that your grandfather could have died, and yet I think we both sat here and agreed the vast majority of people don't want to die in a hospital. And so we have medicalized a lot of the issues that people face in a way that I think is inappropriate. So there is no doubt we, as a society, have to do better in terms of producing better outcomes for the money that we're spending in healthcare. I mean, we Canadians, Ontarians, comfort themselves by comparing ourselves to the United States in terms of how much money we spend on healthcare and the kind of quality outcomes that we produce. But the fact is, we should not be comparing ourselves to what is probably the worst
underperforming
healthcare
jurisdiction.
system in the world in terms of, looking at the key indicators of the health of the population, the amount of money that gets spent, the access to the system, and so on. So there is no doubt that there will be a rejigging of resources in healthcare away from illness care and towards health promotion going forward. And yes, so that does mean we do need to find ways to get more bang for our buck. But what's encouraging about it, from my perspective, is we should be able to produce healthier outcomes for people for less money.
So let's talk about this whole illness care versus healthcare dichotomy, and we'll reference our mutual friend Mark Chamberlain, who often, in his work leading the Poverty Roundtable, used to talk about the relative health of our community, particularly in low-income neighborhoods in Hamilton. And you spoke recently to the Poverty Roundtable about precisely this issue, which is how do we move the social determinants of health so that we don't have the Spectator and Steve Bust in that Code Red series talking about a 21-year age gap between affluent and impoverished neighborhoods. And what role does healthcare and particularly HHS have in helping us to solve that challenge?
Yeah, I think for us at Hamilton Health Sciences, one of the biggest new directions coming out, it's not entirely new, but it's largely new, coming out of this process of community consultation and our own internal thinking on the topic, is, healthcare has been very focused, and hospitals in particular have been very focused on managing the supply of healthcare. So, how can we get better and more efficient at doing what we've been doing, which is basically treating people when they show up to the hospital. And I think,
doing the right things versus doing things right?
So going forward, I think what we need to do is what you and I did in the water business, what we've been doing in the hydro business for some time, and that's to start trying to better manage the demand for health care. And the way you do that is through strategic interventions in the community. So, we shouldn't, as a hospital, be standing by the side of a cliff watching people drive over and saying, our job is to fix them up when they get to the bottom. If we can start to intervene in those people's lives before they drive over that cliff, everybody's going to be a lot better off, and we're going to spend a lot fewer resources doing so. So I think, the concept that I've been promoting is a hospital without walls. So how can we get HHS out into the community using some of those predictive data analytics that I was talking about before, so that we know if somebody shows up with this problem, that probably means 10 years from now they're going to have a much bigger problem. And so can we get involved with that person and say, look, here's a course that you should get on to avoid what's going to happen further down the road. For sure, it is going to require new relationships between hospitals and primary care. Primary care has a huge role to play in this, and the amazing thing is that the relationship between hospitals and primary care kind of got lost over the years, and so that's going to be a key. But I think there's all kinds of other partnerships that hospitals can enter into to really start to get at the nub of this problem.
So we're going to run out of time, but one of those venues for partnerships is something called the Hamilton Anchor Institution Partnership that you and I both, leadership group that you and I both sit on. And it's interesting that the discussions aren't about acute care hospital responses. They are really about things like affordable housing and adequate transportation and pedestrian safe streets, a whole bunch of things that wouldn't historically have been the place that community leaders, particularly hospital CEOs, would have hung their hat. So why exactly are we there?
What's been very impactful for me as I've taken on this job is that so many of the people who we have within our walls, the problem is not that there isn't a world-class surgeon to take care of them, or that there isn't a cutting-edge new procedure to take care of the condition that they're presenting with. The problem is that nobody was able to get to the drugstore to pick up their prescription. or that they're not able to get to the grocery store to start eating the kind of diet that they should be eating. There are very simple interventions that can be made in these folks' lives that would save thousands and thousands of dollars on the back end of their healthcare journey. So, you know, it's an extraordinary thing that the single biggest predictor of your health is your postal code. Right. And so those social determinants of health are things that increasingly we have to think about getting at if we want to start to really wisely use the precious resources of a hospital.
Which again speaks to things like the integration of neighborhoods and the availability of affordable and dignified housing and safe ways to get to and from school or work. And that really is a place at which you inevitably need not only the community but major institutions to work collaboratively to find some solutions and to learn lessons from other jurisdictions that have been down this path.
Yeah, so the Anchor Institutions Group has been an extraordinary opportunity to get some of the key players in the city of Hamilton to sit down together to say, look, how can we better coordinate our efforts in order to create a healthier community here in Hamilton? So there's some interesting new initiatives that I think are going to pop out of that, including, you know, the idea of can we come together around this concept of community hubs to create, you know, small communities that are better supporting people and helping to keep them healthy.
Perfect note on which to finish. I'm sorry we're out of time.
Went by fast.
Rob MacIsaac, it's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for your leadership and your continuing contributions to Hamilton and Hamilton Health Sciences. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and we're going to do great things together in this community going forward. I'm Terry Cook. You've been watching Hamilton's Vital Signs. As always, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I hope you will join us again next week. It's been my pleasure to talk to Rob MacIsaac about our healthy future in Hamilton. Take care. See you soon.